transformative. So something like $1 million or any large amount of money for sanitation efforts would be quite a bit. So that's kind of the opportunity. Where the idea of a bridge home comes from. There's kind of an idea out there, a rumor or a conception, that there's a lot of shelters, that the city of Los Angeles has some kind of sophisticated integrated shelter system where there's shelters all over, and if you wanted a shelter you could access it. And that's more of a rumor than anything else. We do have an emergency winter shelter program that we put up in the winter time because if the temperature drops below a certain temperature, that's dangerous. People can die, right? So we have an emergency winter shelter program, but those are only during the winter program, and they're not quite the same thing as a bridge home. You have to, if you try to access the shelter program, you have to be separated from your spouse if you have one, can't bring your dog in, can't bring your belongings, and then you're kicked out at 6 a.m. And there's rules that you might not want to follow in there anyhow. So for a lot of folks, it doesn't really seem like much of a point to go into it. Anyhow, if you're going to be kicked out at 6 a.m., why go through the trouble of getting to the shelter, getting intaked, and all of that? So the concept of a bridge home is kind of a challenge to neighborhoods to think of what kind of interim housing solution could be received in neighborhoods. The idea then being that if we have interim housing in a neighborhood where there's a heavy concentration of homelessness, then that interim housing better facilitates folks getting into permanent housing. It's kind of a thing that interim housing is a really important step to getting people off the streets and into permanent housing, because if you're on the streets, it can be kind of difficult to get ready for housing interviews, and it can be kind of difficult to leave your belongings behind and go seek out housing units. It'd be kind of difficult when you're worrying about just basic survival to then get into housing. So without that interim solution, without someone in a more semi-stable state, it can be very difficult for folks to get into permanent housing. So the idea of the interim housing is to get eventually more folks permanently housed. Yeah, so that's kind of where the idea came from, what the opportunity is for a neighborhood, and it's kind of like a template. We could come up with whatever we wanted or nothing, and kind of work on the idea of what Venice would be able or willing or interested in having in Venice, both for the ability to get more folks housed in permanent situations, get people immediately off the streets, so we're not waiting years for supportive housing to be built, affordable housing, but we're getting them off the streets now, and also so that we can access that dedicated pot of sanitation dollars that will clean up Venice and really could be transformative in Venice. In fact, could be a renaissance in terms of cleanliness around here. So that's kind of all I had. I just wanted to introduce the idea against the mayor's proposal, but it's something that I thought, since I had so many questions about, was germane to talk about. And I wanted to bring to the committee and suggest that maybe the committee wants to, and many other people are invited, maybe have a subcommittee discussion about, or a discussion at someone's apartment. I live a couple blocks away. I volunteer mine or anyone else's house, and we can just have a good conversation about it.
Yeah, so rather than, this isn't a question and answer right now, so this is really just an opportunity for Taylor to present what the opportunities are. We're looking to do another meeting on May 22nd, which would allow the community to actually give their input, and so we could actually come up with a way that the community has a say in how this might be done.
I'd like to make a comment, though.
I'm sorry, you can't
they
do that.
kick them out at 6 a.m. on shelters. Why not on the streets are they kicked out at 6 a.m.?
This isn't a back and forth, this isn't a dialogue, this is a presentation. So
Okay.
during the public comment, which we just went through.
But I'll talk to you afterwards if you want to come.
So we have to, as I said before, we've got a lot to do.
I couldn't have public comment.
Ma'am, we've
if I
got to
did.